Okay, hey guys, we are going to do a PERT practice review, getting us ready to take our PERT in the upcoming week here to get our math credit. And just as a quick reminder, we are not going to be able to use a calculator on the PERT, so we're going to make sure that we, as we're working through today, that we know how to, we understand how to do everything without a calculator. So let's jump right into it. So number one says, express 5/8 as a decimal, so that means 5 divided by 8. So I'm going to have to do, unfortunately, a little bit of long division. So because I'm doing 5 divided by 8, 5 goes underneath. Obviously, 8 does not go into 5 at all, so I'm going to start with a 0, put a decimal place, and add a 0 right afterwards as well. So then I say to myself, okay, 8 times what number gets me as close as possible to 50? That would be 6. So 6 times 8 is 48. And then we subtract our numbers from one another. So 48, so 50 minus 48 gives me 2. And then I don't want to have any remainder left over, so I'm going to add another 0 and then bring it down. So I've got 8 times what number gets me as close as possible to 20? That would be a 2. So 8 times 2 is 16. And then again, I subtract the 2 of them, I get 4 here. And then I still have a remainder, so I have to add another 0 and bring it down. So this time, though, I know that 8 times 5 gives me 40, and when I subtract those numbers, I get a remainder of 0, so my answer is 0.625 for my first problem. Okay, number 2, find the solutions to the given equation.
Not taking attendance, it has to be done today. It is FDE case final. So before you leave today or today, please make sure that you do your attendance. Thank you.
Okay, because this is a quadratic equation, in order to solve for the solutions, it does have to equal 0. And so what I'm going to have to do is rewrite this equation to be everything that's on the right of the equation is going to have to move over to the left side, and I'm going to have to get 0 on the right side. So I'm going to subtract 2x from the right and do it from the left as well. Essentially, I'm just moving it over to the other side. So I've got 2x squared minus 2x equals 24. And then again, I have to do the same thing, get the 24 to the other side by doing the opposite, by subtracting it from both sides. So my new equation that I'm going to use is 2x squared minus 2x minus 24, and set that equal to 0. Now that it looks like that, I can factor my equation, and factoring is going to be how I get my solutions to the equations. Before I factor, though, I'm going to make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to take out the greatest common denominator here. And so I see that all of these can be divided by 2. So I'm going to pull a 2 out of the equation because that's going to make my numbers a little bit easier. So 2 times x squared gets me back to the 2x squared. 2 times negative 1x gives me negative 2x, and 2 times negative 12 gives me negative 24 there. So this is going to be the equation I use. Now that it looks like this might look like something you remember how to do. This first value in front of the x, which is a 1, that is your a value. The negative 1 is your b value. And this last one over here is your c value. So you might have learned a couple different ways to do these types of problems. You might know the quadratic formula, which is the song that goes x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 ac all over 2a. So you might know that one, or you might know the box method, which is really what I like to use when I have problems like these, because I think the box method is a little bit simpler. So what you do with the box method is you take your first term, so that would be this one right over here, the 1x squared, and I put it in my first box up in the upper left. In the one diagonal from it, I put my c value, which is negative 12. And then in the 2 boxes that are left over, I have to come up with a number, or 2 numbers, excuse me, that multiply to be my a times c value. So that would be 1 times negative 12. So I need to come up with 2 numbers that multiply to give me negative 12, but add up to be my b value, which is negative 1. So I should really say b, sorry. My b value. So the only 2 numbers that I can think of would be a 4 and a 3 multiply to get me to 12. But since they have to multiply to be negative, one of them has to be negative. And then when I add them, I want it to be -1. So that means the bigger number has to be negative. So my two numbers are -4 and then +3. And I put an X after both of them because they're adding up to be my B value. And my B value right over here has the X. So now from this point, I have to figure out what my factors are. So I have to say, okay, if this is like the result, I need to figure out what two numbers multiply to give me 1x squared. That would be x times x gives me 1x squared. X times what number gives me -4x? That would be -4. And then x times what number gives me 3x? That would be a +3. So these numbers in orange that are left over, these are my factors. Okay, so my factors are x plus 3 and x minus 4. Now, that's great, but I'm actually asking you for the solution. And so the solution means you have to set each one of them individually equal to 0. Well, if you get x plus 3, like an algebra problem, and you set it equal to 0, to get the x by itself, you'd have to do the opposite, which is subtract 3 from both sides. So your x value, your first one would be a -3, and then you would do the same with this one, the x minus 4 you'd set equal to 0, and then obviously to do the opposite of minus, you'd have to add it, so you'd get a +4. So your solution for this one is -3 and positive. Oops, did I just circle the wrong one? Yes, I did. -3 and +4. My fault, sorry about that. Okay, there is your next equation for your solutions. Okay, let's go on down to the next one. All right, number 3, solve for x. So in this problem, it's a little bit of just straight up algebra. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewrite the equation over here to the left. So it's -7x minus 20 equals 5 minus parentheses -x minus 7. Okay, so this is an algebra equation. I'm going to look on the left side. And over here on the left, I can't combine any like terms, unfortunately. So it just stays -7x minus 20. So nothing changes on the left. On the right, I do have some parentheses. And so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to take that negative sign there, and I'm going to have to distribute it or give it away to everything on the inside of the parentheses. Now, if there's no number there, you can always put a 1 there. And I'm now going to distribute my -1, excuse me, to everything in the parentheses. So first thing is I'm just going to bring down the 5, and then now I'm going to distribute. So -1 times -x gives me +1x, and -1 times -7 gives me a +7. Now, on the right side, I can combine some like terms. The 5 and the 7 are on the same side of the equation, so I can add them up together. So on the left, I'm just rewriting the same thing again. So 7 and 5 gives me 12. Yeah, and then plus 1x. And so now I want to get all my x's to one side, all my numbers to the other side. I would always suggest moving the smallest x. So -7x is the smaller one. So I'm going to do the opposite by adding it to both sides. And whatever I do to one side of the equation, right, I have to do to the other. So I've got -20 equals 12. And then 1x plus 7x gives me 8x's, and then the last step is to subtract 12 on both sides because I'm trying to get the x by itself. So -20 minus 12 means I borrowed $20 and then I borrowed another $12 from you. In total, I borrowed $32, so it's a negative. And then my last step is to get the x by itself, so my final step is to divide both sides by 8. So -32 divided by 8 gives me x equals -4. Worst case scenario, if you got stuck and you didn't know what to do, my suggestion is, since it's multiple choice, you can always take the answer and you can just plug it in and see if you get the right answer from there. All right, so that's always another choice as you're going through and working on these problems. Okay. Number 4 is find the solutions to the given equation. Again, it's an n squared problem, which means it's going to look just like the number 2 that we just did with the box. So first thing is I have to rewrite this equation because I want it to equal 0. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to add the 3n to both sides, and I'm going to have to subtract the 18, right? Because I'm undoing it. I'm moving it over to the other side. My equation is going to be n squared plus 3n minus 18 equals 0. And that's going to be what I'm going to do my factoring now. So now I'm going to draw my box again. Okay, in my first box goes my a value, which is n squared. In my box diagonal from it goes my c value, which is negative 18. Now I need to come up with two numbers that multiply to give me a times c. So there's a 1 in front of that n. So it's 1 times negative 18, which is negative 18. So two numbers that multiply to give me negative 18, but add up to give me my b value, which is 3. So I have to think of two numbers that multiply to give me 18, negative 18, but add up to be a 3. Well, the only thing I can think of is 6 times 3. And if I want it to be a negative multiplication, one of them will have to be negative, but since the b value is positive, that means the smaller one would have to be negative. So 6 times negative 3 is negative 18. 6 plus negative 3 gives me positive 3. So now I'm going to put those two in my box here. And now from here, we will figure out the factors. So obviously n times n gives me n squared. That's easy. N times what number gives me 6n? That would be a 6. And n times what number gives me negative 3? That would be negative 3. And that would multiply to give me negative 3n. So my factors are going to be n plus 6 and then n minus 3. And remember, remember it has to equal 0. Okay, I'm obviously at the, sorry about that, team, obviously at the edge of my page, so it's not letting me write anymore. So because, sorry, I'm trying this for the first time, guys. Okay, that's not working, so we're going to have to leave it there. So because we're setting them both equal to 0, n plus 6, if we set that equal to 0, okay, now I don't know what's going on. This is annoying. Oh my gosh, stop!
Well, following the instructions, please contact Ms. Ventura real quick. Mr. Klapka, Mr. Knott, Ms. Lane, and Ms. Burke. Can you guys call Ms. Ventura at 2005? Thanks.
Okay, well now I'm a little bit annoyed. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to put on my... Oh, give me one moment. I thought I was so cute here to make this happen, and clearly... Oh, now it's working, really? What the heck? Ugh. All right, so if I set essentially each one of these equal to 0, the n plus 6 would mean that my n value is really negative 6. And then if I put n minus 3 equal to 0, it's really going to give me a positive 3. So my answer for this problem is a negative 6 and a positive 3, which is letter A. Okay, so it's just my mouse thing. It's not working. Okay. How about now? Still no. Okay, so I'm going to abandon this, friends, and I'm going to go to my trusty, what's it called here? My Elmo. This is what happens when you think you're tech savvy and you're not. And so now, you guys gotta just bear with me for a second. I'm so sorry. Oh, okay, here we go. All right. Unfortunately, that just means we're going to have to do it the old school way. Okay, so let's take a look at number 7. I'm videotaping myself. I told you I had to do this. No, I'm videotaping myself now. So say hi to everybody. Okay, have a great weekend. All right, number 7, let's take a look. So number 7 says solve for y. So essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the y value all by itself in this problem. So I'm going to have to rewrite the equation to get y all alone. So that means everything that's not a y has to get to the other side. So the first thing I'm going to move over, I like to put a 1 in front of my x's because I think it makes life a little bit easier. If I'm going to move a positive 1x over, I have to subtract the 1x from both sides. So I get 2y equals, now you can't do 4 minus 1x because one of them has a variable, one doesn't, so they're not like terms, so you can't combine them. So I'm just going to write 4 minus 1x. Then the last part is get y by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2, and when you divide the left side by 2, it'll cancel, but on the right, you have to divide every term by 2, all of them. So I end up getting y equals 4 divided by 2 is 2. Negative 1 divided by 2 just stays negative 1 divided by 2. And then I bring down my x. So there's my answer. So it's in a different order up here, right? This is the same one, but it's just backwards. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing it, like having these two flipped with one another. Okay, number 8. Simplify the expression. Okay, so I see some parentheses here and I see numbers in front of the parentheses, which means I'm going to have to do some distribution. So I'm going to rewrite the problem. Minus 5, x plus 6. Okay, and so from here, there's no really like solving for this problem because there's no equal sign. All you're doing is simplifying it. You're making it as small as possible. So I'm going to take those numbers in front of the parentheses and I'm going to distribute them. So negative 3 times positive 4 gives me negative 12. Negative 3 times negative 7x gives me a positive 21x. Negative 5 times positive x gives me negative 5x. And negative 5 times positive 6 gives me negative 30. Now from here, I'm going to combine some like terms. So I can put all of the x's together. So 21x's minus 5x's give me 16x's. And then I can also combine together the constants, which is negative 12 and negative 30, which gives me a negative 42. So think about it as like you've got 12 minus signs and 30 minus signs. In total, you have 42 minus signs. So if I look up here for the one that matches, that would be letter D. Okay, next problem. I'm trying to find my larger one. See, again, told you guys this is what happens when you think you're... I was so ready to be tech savvy for today. Okay. Number 9. All right. So for this problem, it says simplify the expression. And what we have is you've got some division here, right? But you also, did I skip 2 problems? I'm just realizing that now. I skipped 2 problems. Wow, you guys, I am so sorry. This is about to be a really bad video. My apologies. Please forgive me. We never did number 5, I just realized. Okay, number 5 says simplify the expression. And the reason I remembered is because it looks the same as the next one. In this problem, we've got 25p to the 6th power divided by 10p to the 3rd power. So what I can do is I can take the numbers that are the constants and I can do that division first by itself. So if I do 25 divided by 10, it doesn't come out to be a whole number, but what I can do is reduce the fraction. And so 25 and 10, I can divide both of those by 5. So 25 divided by 5 gives me 5, and 10 divided by 5 gives me 2. Now, the ones that have the variables that have the exponents, all you have to do is take whatever exponents at the top, and subtract the exponent from the bottom. So 6 minus 3 gives me a positive 3, and positive exponents stay on the top of the fraction. So my answer here would be 5/2, and the p cubed is up at the top. So letter D. Okay. Next one. Which of the following shows the factored form of the following equation? So since this is a factor problem, again, we're going to make our box and we're going to plug some things in. Hopefully you're noticing that it's like a lot of the same thing over and over again. So my first value, my A value goes in the first one, m squared. My C value goes in the last one, which is 9. I have to come up with two numbers that multiply to give me 1 times 9, which is 9, and add up to give me my B value, which is -10. So two numbers that multiply to give me a positive but add up to be a negative means both of them have to be negative numbers. So -9 times -1 multiplies to be a positive, but when I add them together, I get a negative. So I've got -9m and -1m. And now I'm going to figure out the factors that go on the outside. So m times m is m squared. M times what gives me -9m? That would be -9. And m times what gives me -1? That would be a -1. So my factors are m minus 9 and m minus 1. So I'm going to come find that. That looks like letter B. Okay. Now let's go to the next side, which is number 9. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, number 9, simplify the expression. So we start with our numbers, right? The constants. So 24 divided by 8, you can do that. You'll get a whole number. You get 3. And then I look at my variables here, r cubed and r. Now r cubed, and then if you've got an r with nothing with it, that means there's really a 1. The exponent is there. We never put the 1. So 3 minus 1 would give me 2. So it's r squared, and that's a positive number, so it stays on top of the fraction. And there's my answer, letter D. All right, number 10, solve for x. So it's just a lot of, I see parentheses, I see numbers in front of the parentheses, which means it's a lot of distribution. So I'm going to come rewrite my equation right next to it. Plus, actually, I really should have done it below. Oh, there's not a lot of space there. Sorry about that. Plus 5x equals -1 minus 3x. Okay, so I'm going to be real with you. Whenever I have problems like this and I have an equal sign, I always put a line straight down the equal sign, because that says now I've got a left side of the equation and a right side of the equation, and I'm going to do them one side at a time. So on the left, I'm just going to ignore the right side over here. On the left, I see my parentheses, which is going to be the first thing I do, right, in order of operations. And I've got the -6 in front of it, so I'm going to distribute or multiply, give it away to everything in the parentheses. So -6 times 1 is -6. -6 times 5x gives me -30x. And then the 5x, this other one, is not inside the parentheses, so I just bring it down. Okay, so there's my left side of the equation. Now I'm going to go to the right and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to ignore this side and I'm just going to look at the right. Again, I've got a number in front of the parentheses, so I'm going to distribute. 8 times -1 is -8, and 8 times -3x is -24x. Okay, so I've got my parentheses, I'm done there. So now I'm going to go back to the left side and I'm going to combine anything that looks the same that I can put together. I'm going to combine like terms. So on the left, I see that I have x's, so I can put those together. The -6 does not have an x, so it's going to have to stay all by itself. So I'm going to rewrite the -6. And then I've got -30x plus 5. So think about you're being on a number line. If you're at -30 to the left and you go 5 to the right, you would be at -25x's. And then if I look on the right, I realize I can't do anything over here. I can't combine any like terms. So I'm just going to rewrite the problems down. Now from here, I have to get all of my x's to the same side of the line and all of my y's, or sorry, and all of my constants to the other side of the line. So my suggestion when you have something that looks like this is always go for your smaller x and move that first. So of the x's, -25 is my smaller one. So I'm going to move it over to the other side by undoing it, by doing the opposite operation. So since this is negative, I'm going to make mine a positive. And whatever I do on one side of the equation, have to do on the other. Working from left to right, I bring down my -6 and my x's will cancel. On the right, I didn't use my -8, so I bring it down. 24 plus 25x, sorry. Did I just mess this up again? Yes, this was supposed to be a negative sign. I just realized that. There we go. Okay, -24 plus 25 gives me a positive 1x. My apologies there. And then now I've got the x's on the right, so I'm going to move my numbers to the left. So I'm going to add 8, add 8. So -6 plus 8 gives me 2. And then I'm left with 1x. And then if you want, you can divide by 1, but you're going to get the same thing, x equals 2. So now I'm going to come up here. Here's my answer. And again, just like I told you before, if you can't figure it out, like if you made a mistake, if I went through and I actually made that mistake all the way through and realized I got something wrong, then my next step would be to take these numbers and to plug them in everywhere I saw an X and see which one made sense, which one made the sentence to be true. Okay, so if you make a mistake, there's still other ways you can go about solving the problem. All right. Number 11. The 0.16 is the solution to which of the following systems? Now, you could actually physically sit here and do all of the systems of equation by either elimination, substitution, like you could definitely do that, but I'm going to make my life easy, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this first point is my x value, the second one's my y, if you think about it on a graph, and I'm just going to plug them into the equations, and I'm going to see which one matches, which one works. Okay, so in the first problem, I'm going to do letter A over here. In the first problem, I've got 4x minus y, so that means 4 times x, and instead of x, I'm going to substitute in a 1 minus my y value. I'm going to substitute in a -6. I'm trying to see if that equals 10 or not, if that's a true statement. 4 times 1 is 4. Minus a -6, so minus a negative, they come together, they make it a positive. So this is 4 plus 6. Well, guess what? 4 plus 6, that's correct. One of them's good. The first part is good. Now I'm going to try plugging it into the second one. 10 times x, my x is 1, plus 6 times y, my y is -6. I need to see, does that equal -26? 10 times 1 is 10. 6 times -6 is -36. And 10 minus 36 is -26. Wow, that worked out. Okay, so there we go. That's my answer. It worked out. Ta-da! So just plugged in. If it didn't work, I would keep going. But since that one worked, hey, I'm all in. On to the next one. Okay, number 12. Evaluate the expression -a minus b plus c when a equals -3, b is -2, and c is 5. So what I have to do is I have to substitute in my answers into that equation. Now, I got to be really careful with the signs here. -a minus b plus c. So I'm going to keep the negative sign, and in parentheses, I'm going to write my a value, which is -3. Okay, minus, now I'm going to put my b value, which is -2. Notice I'm putting them in parentheses. Plus, my c value is 5. Now we go from left to right. Remember, minus a negative. Think about it as like if I said, Miss Damaso is not a teacher. that means I am a teacher, right? So two negatives next to each other, they cancel each other out. They make it into a positive statement. So minus a -3 is really a +3. Minus a -2 is really a +2. And then +5. So 3 + 2 + 5 is 10. Beautiful. Number 13. Another evaluate the expression. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to rewrite the equation. And again, I'm going to be really careful to plug in my pieces very, very carefully. So negative, and then for my a value, I'm plugging in 4 plus a value again, I plug in a 4 times parentheses 3 times whatever my b value is, which is -2 plus 2. Now, this one is a little daunting, I guess, because there's more negative signs, there's more parentheses, but we're still just going to follow the order of operations. And remember, order of operations is please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So the first thing I always want to do is get rid of my parentheses, okay? So here's a set of parentheses right here. So I'm going to ignore everything else in front of it and worry just about my parentheses. So 3 times -2 gives me -6, and -6 plus 2, right, in the parentheses, that gives me -4. So this whole thing becomes -4. Now I'm going to rewrite everything else. It's multiplied by a 4 right next to it plus a -4. Now it looks like this. So I did my parentheses. There are no exponents. My next thing is to multiply. So I have to multiply 4 times -4 first. So 4 times -4 gives me -16. And now I've got the last step, -4 minus 16. So think about it, I borrowed $4. I borrowed another $16. In total, I borrowed $20. So my answer is B. Order of operations is everything. You must follow order of operations. You're not going to get the question right. Okay, number 14. Which of the following is the y-intercept of the given equation? So y-intercept is when the x value is 0, because think about y-intercept means where it's on the, where it crosses the y-axis. And so if you're on the y-axis, like over here, right, if that's like 0, 2, then your x value is 0, your y value would be, and this is a line, right, your y value would be whatever it is in your x value would be 0. So the y-intercept is when the x value is 0, which just means I'm going to plug in 0 wherever I see an x, and then I'm going to solve for y. Oops, -6. Okay, so wherever I see an x, I'm plugging in a 0. So I only see it in one spot. -5 times 0. Well, 5 times 0 is 0. So I'm really just going to solve this problem for y now. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. I get -2y equals 6, and then divide both sides by -2. My y value is -3. Easy peasy. Okay. Number 15. Factor the given expression completely. So anytime you see factor or find the solutions, that means it's time to draw a box. Okay, first one is my first term n squared, last one is my last term, -80. I need to come up with two numbers that multiply to be my a value, which is 1 times c. So 1 times -80 gives me negative 80. So I need two numbers that multiply to give me negative 80, but add up to be my B value, which is negative 2. So what two numbers multiply to give me negative 80, but add up to be negative 2? That means one's positive, one's negative. I know 10 times 8, that's 80. That should work. So negative 10 times 8, right? Because negative 10 plus 8 gives me negative 2. So negative 10n and 8n. And now we figure out the factors. This first one is like the easiest, right? You definitely know it's n times n. Easy peasy. Now, n times what gives me negative 10n? It's negative 10. And n times what gives me 8n? It is 8. So my factors are n minus 10 and n plus 8. Number 16. Which expression is equivalent to the following expression? Okay, so this time notice that I'm essentially giving you the factors and I want to know what would be the equation afterwards. So essentially what we're going to do is this box method, but we're going to go just the opposite way. And I think you guys are going to like this one a little bit more. Here's why. I'm telling you that the numbers on the outside are here. So this is 5u. This is a positive 4v. My next one is a positive u times a negative 2v. And almost like if we were doing like a Punnett square, right? If you had like recessive and dominant traits and you'd have to figure out the inside by multiplying, that's exactly the same thing we're doing here. It's just like the math way of it, right? So 5u times u is 5u squared. 4v times u is a positive 4uv. That means literally 4 times u times v. 5u times negative 2v is negative 10uv. And 4v times negative 2v is negative 8v squared. So already I see 5u squared and negative 8v squared. So I know I can cross off C and D because those don't have those. And now this last part is when I go to write the sentence or the statement here, the equation, 5u squared goes by itself. That goes first. That's my first term. Negative 8v squared is my last term. And remember, we had to take these two. They're the same. They've got the same variables. We had to add them together to be our v value. So negative 10 plus 4 is negative 6. And this is a u v. So my answer is letter B. Letter B. So if I ask you to factor, that means you're coming up with the numbers on the outside. If I ask you to write the expression, that means you're coming up with the answers on the inside. So the box really works for a lot of this stuff. Okay. Number 17. Solve the equation for A. So this just means I'm trying to get A all by itself. So I've got Z equals negative 2A minus 2. Okay. So it's just an algebra problem. I'm trying to get the A all by itself. So everything that's not an A has to get moved to the other side. So the first thing I'm going to move is this minus 2 by doing the opposite, which is adding 2. And remember, you can't do Z plus 2 because they're not like terms. So I'm just going to literally write Z plus 2 and bring down my minus 2A. And now last step is to get the A by itself. I have to divide by negative 2. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. You have to do to everything. So divide by negative 2, divide by negative 2. Okay, now there's nothing in front of the Z. You can put a 1 there. So 1 divided by negative 2 just stays 1 over negative 1 over 2. I keep the Z. And then positive 2 divided by negative 2 is a negative 1. And there's my A value. So that would be letter A. Here we go. Okay. Find the solutions that make the statement true. So find the solutions means make the box. I hope you're noticing we are like making this box like it's our dang job, aren't we? By the end of this, you're gonna be very good at factoring, I hope. So first term is 2x squared. Diagonal is -9. I got to come up with two numbers that multiply to be a times c. So 2 times -9 gives me -18. And it has to add up to be my b value, which is -3. So two numbers that multiply to give me -18 but add up to be -3. So one of them has to be negative, and the bigger one has to be negative. So that would be a -6 and a +3. Does that work? Yes, it does. So -6x, +3x. Okay, now this time it's a little different because you go, what times what gives you 2x squared? I know it's definitely an x and an x. One of these has to be a 2, but I'm not sure which one. If I put, let's say, if I put the 2 here, 2x times something would not get me to 3x. So I know that this one can't be where the 2 goes. This one on the left has to be where the 2 goes. So x times what gives me 3x? That's a 3. And then 2x times what gives me -6x? That would be a -3. So my factors are x minus 3 and 2x plus 3. And then if I want to actually find the solutions, I have to set each one equal to 0. Well, I already know this is x minus 3 means my answer, I'd have to add 3 to both sides. So my x value would have to be a +3. And really I can stop there because I can see the only one that has +3 is this one. So that's my answer. But if I wanted to just check, if I set the second one equal to 0, I'd have to subtract 3 from both sides. 2x equals -3 and then divide by 2 on both sides. So x equals -3/2, which is what that says. Okay. Number 19, solve for x. So I already see some parentheses and I see a number in front of the parentheses, which means distribution. So I'm going to have to distribute the -4 to everything inside the parentheses on the left. And then I'm going to have to start moving some pieces around. All right, so -4 times 3x gives me -12x. -4 times 2 gives me -8. Can't do anything on the right, so I just rewrite the whole thing. Now from here, there's nothing to combine together on the left. There's nothing that I can combine together on the right, so that means I now have to start moving some pieces. Always go for your smallest x, which is -12, and do the opposite to bring it to the other side. So I'm going to add 12x to both sides. Working from left to right, I'm left with -8 equals, I didn't use my 40, so I bring it down. 4x plus 12x is 16x. And now I want to get the x alone, so I'm going to move the 40 by subtracting it. -8 minus 40 is -48. And then my last step is to get x alone, so I divide both sides by 16. So my answer here is x equals -3. But again, if you weren't sure what to do, you could always just plug in each of the numbers until you find the one that matches. Okay. Number 20. Which of the following is the equation of the line that passes through 2, -5, with a slope of -2? So if you remember the equation for a line, it's y equals mx plus b. And the m value is your slope. That's the rise over the run, or the change of y over change of x. I see that all of these have -2 in them, so I can't really get rid of any that way. But this is, excuse me, my x value, and this is my y value. So I'm just going to plug them in and see which one gives me a statement that's true. So for now, I'm going to start with letter A. I'm just going to go in order. Instead of y, I'm going to plug in -5. equals -2 times my x value. I'm going to plug in a 2. And then -1. So let's see, does that work? -2 times 2 is -4. Oh, what do you know? -4 minus 1 gives me -5. Well, that was lucky. Letter A is my answer. Easy peasy. So like you can see here, I mean, there's like another way to go about this that's much longer and more in depth, but if you just plug in values, it's almost easier that, well, it's not almost, it is easier that way. So I would always suggest if you're not sure what to do, plug in some values. Oh, Susie. Okay. Solve each inequality and graph its solution. So essentially I'm trying to get the y value, or the n value in this case, by itself, and then I'm going to graph it. Now, I see that this is a less than or equal to symbol. When it has the equal to, that means we have to color it in. If it was just less than or greater than, then it would be an open circle. So just by looking, I can already cross off letter D because that was an open circle. So I know it's got to be one of the ones over here, and I'm going to figure out which one by solving the problem. Woo! For M. I'm sorry, I'm very tired. Okay. So think about this as though this is your equal sign, okay? So you're doing it exactly the same way you would do any other problem. It's just instead of an equal sign, it's a little less than or equal to. So I'm going to get m by itself. So I'm going to start by subtracting 5 from both sides. I get 3m equals 12. Or sorry, is less than or equal to 12. And then I divide both sides by 3. I get m is less than or equal to 4. So I'm going to come up here to my graph. The only one that starts at 4, less than or equal to 4 means anything smaller than 4. So there we go. Letter B is my graph. Okay. 22. Evaluate using the values given. So I've got -3 for my x value. I've got 3 for my y value. So just like we did before, I'm going to be really careful about plugging in my pieces. So instead of y, I'm going to plug in a 3 here. Minus, instead of x, I'm going to put in -3 and then plus 4. Okay, order of operations says, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, starts with P, which is parentheses. So I'm going to do the parentheses first. -3 plus 4 gives me just a +1. So I've got 3 cubed minus, this is just 1. Next thing is exponents, and 3 cubed is the exponent. That means 3 times 3 times 3. It means this number times itself this many times. So 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 times 3 is 27. So this is 27, and then I subtract 1 from it. You get 26. Okay, 23 is another evaluate the expression. So we're going to follow the order of operations once more. We're going to be careful about which ones we plug into. I'm sorry, you guys. I did not mean to be yawning this much. Okay, 6 minus z is a 6 minus z is a 6 again plus x is a 4 minus x is a 4 again. Okay, remember, order of operations says we have to do, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So parentheses first. 6 minus 6 is 0. Plus 4 is 4. Minus 4 is still 0. So when you do parentheses, if it's just addition and subtraction, you have to go from left to right. This is just a 0. 6 minus 0 is 6. Ta-da! So make sure you're following order operations, otherwise you won't get the problems right. 24, same thing. Order of operations, we have to simplify. So first thing I'm going to do is, well, after I rewrite it, is Pemdas. So Pemdas is here inside. I'm going to do parentheses first. So here's my parentheses. It's 3 minus 3. So I'm going to rewrite everything else And 3 minus 3 is just 0. And then I bring down my squared and I bring down my plus 4. Okay. Next thing is my exponents. That's the 2. So 0 squared means this number times itself this many times. So 0 times 0 is still just 0. So did this. Next is multiplication and division from left to right. So the first multiplication I see is -6 times 0. That's still just 0. So I'm just going to put plus 0. And then I bring down my 4. And now last part is addition and subtraction from left to right. -6 plus 0 is -6. Plus 4 is -2. Okay, almost done. All right, 37 divided by 20. Now, I'm not even going to do this problem because I can see the answer already. Think about it this way. If you say 37 divided by 20, that's like saying I have 37 cookies that I want to divvy up between 20 people, right? And so you have more cookies than you do people. That means every single person, all 20 people, are going to get a cookie. They're all going to get one. And then there's going to be some left over. So it's going to be 1 and some change. So the only one that's a positive number there with 1 and some change is letter C. So 37 divided by 20 is 1.85. So using some logic and reasoning here kind of helps us out with some of these problems. All right, almost done. We're so close. 26. What is the y-intercept of the following equation? So remember, y-intercept is when the x value is 0. So I'm just going to plug it into the equation. Wherever I see x, I'm going to plug in 0. So 6 times 0 is 0. So this cancels. You're just left with y equals -5. That's it. There you go. Easy. I'm sure you're probably like, wait, that was it? Yeah, that was it. All right. Solve the system of linear equations. So when it comes to solving systems, you've got a couple different ways. You can do elimination. You can do substitution. I personally like to do elimination just for all of them because I think it's the easiest. And elimination is when you try to either get the x's to match up with the same number or the y's to match up with the same number. So that way you can subtract them and cancel them out and only be left with one variable. So what I like to do is I say, okay, I'm going to either get rid of the x's or I'm going to get rid of the y's. And it doesn't matter which one you choose. I'm going to just choose the y's because I want to. To get 3 and 4 to cancel out, they'd have to be the same number, which means I can't subtract them right now, right, because they're not the same number. But I could multiply the equations, and that would help me get to being the same number. So all you have to do is take the equation and flip-flop the number in front of the variable. So since this is a 3 here, I'm going to multiply the bottom one by 3. And since this is a 4 here, I'm going to multiply the top one by 4. And if you do that, it's going to cancel everything out. Now, when you multiply, you have to be sure that you give this 4 away to everything inside of the parentheses, which means the entire equation. So you can't forget any of the pieces, otherwise it's not going to work out. So 4 times 2x gives me 8x. 4 times positive 3y gives me a positive 12y. Equals 4 times negative 9 gives me a negative 36. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing for the second equation. 3 times negative 5 gives me negative 15x. 3 times negative 4 gives me negative 12y. And 3 times 26 gives me 78. Okay, now I can see that I can get my y's to cancel out from here. So what I need to do is I need to say to myself, okay, if I want my y's to cancel, a positive and a negative 12y, then what I'm going to need to do is I need to add these equations together, because a positive 12 plus a negative 12 is going to cancel these out. And then I have to do the same for the rest of the equation. So 8 plus a negative 15 gives me negative 7x. My y's canceled, and now I've got negative 36 plus 78, or in other words, it's just 78 minus 36, and that is 42. And now from here, I can solve for x. So to get x by itself, it's just one more step. Divide both sides by negative 7. I get x equals negative 6. So now I come up here, there's only one with x equals negative 6. And I'm done. So elimination to me is the easiest one, and that's the easiest way to do it. You just find either the x's or the y's, and you just flip-flop the numbers in front of the variable and multiply, and you're good to go. Okay, almost done. 3 more. Find the solutions. We got an x squared. That means it's time for a box. I'm sure you're rolling your eyes at me now like, my gosh, Mr. Mass, how many boxes can we do? A million, forever. Okay, first box is x squared. Last box is negative 15. Got to find two numbers that multiply to give me a times c, which is 1 times negative 15. And add up to be my b value, which is negative 2. So let's see. 3 and 5 will give me 15, and I want the bigger one to be negative. So 3 and negative 5, does that work? Yeah, that's a negative 2. Okay, so this is, one of these is a 3x, doesn't matter. One of these is a negative 5x. And now I figure out what my factors are. So my factors are x times x for sure. X times what gives me 3x, that's a 3. It's a positive 3 if you want to put a plus. And x times what gives me negative 5x, that's a negative 5. So your factors are x minus 5 and x plus 3. And to solve it, I'd set each one equal to 0. So obviously I'm going to add the 5, which means this is a positive 5. I'm going to subtract the 3, which means this is a negative 3. So positive 5 and a negative 3 are my solutions to the equations. You also technically could, I guess, just plug them in as well, right? Like you could plug in the x value here and see which ones actually work to give you 0. That would be another way to do it if you didn't want to do the box, but I think box is easier. Okay, solve the inequality and graph the solution. So I'm going to have to solve for a in this problem. So let's rewrite the equation. Okay, remember, think about this as an equal sign. Now, I see that this is a less than, which means it's going to be an open circle. All of these are open circles, so there's none to cross off, unfortunately. But now we'll work on the two sides. So on the left, I see that there's nothing to do. It's just a negative 8. On the right, I can do 2a minus 6a's. So if I have 2a's and I subtract 6a's, I've got negative 4a's. And then to get a all by itself, I divide by negative 4. Now, when you divide by a negative number in an inequality, you must change the sign over here from either greater than or less than. You must flip the sign, okay? That only is when you divide by a negative. So when you divide by a negative, you have to change the inequality. That means flip it, essentially, right? From greater than to less than. So negative 8 divided by negative 4 gives me a positive 2, and I have to turn my inequality the other way. And so now it says 2 is greater than a, or in other words, if you like it reading it the other way, I would just flip this whole thing. That is the same as saying a is less than 2. So I find the 2 less than 2, that's letter C. It's the only one. Okay, and final problem. Factor completely. Oh my goodness, this one looks great. Now, this one's got crazy big numbers, and anytime you have a lot of big numbers, the easiest thing to do is pull out a greatest common factor. So say, between these numbers, do they all have a number in common that I can pull out? Now, just by looking, you can see, hey, I can divide them all by 8 because you see all of them have an 8 pulled out. Now, I can't pull out, like some of these have an X here. I can't pull out an X because not all of them have an X. The 64 does not have an X. So just by looking, I can tell D and A are not correct. It's going to have to be one of the other two. So now I say 8 times what gives me 24xy squared. That would be 8 times 3. And then I would need the x and the y squared. And just by like stopping there, I already see what the answer is, right? Because C is the only one that would fit. But you can finish it. 8 times what gives you negative 56x? That's a negative 7x. And 8 times what gives you negative 64? That's a negative 8. So there you go. Okay, so we're done with our PERT review. Hopefully that was helpful. Sorry about all the technical difficulties earlier on, but I hope that what you're kind of noticing is it's very repetitive, and some of the key things to make sure you know how to do are factoring, right? So the box method is huge. Definitely need to know that one. You need to know how to be able to use order of operations and plug things in. That's another really, really big one. And then other than that, just being able to solve for X's or Y's or whatever the variable is the other important piece. Okay, so now we are finished with our first PERT review. You've got a second PERT review that you now can do hopefully on your own and give it an attempt. And then hopefully this was helpful for you, and good luck on your PERT. And have a grand day, my gems.